All right, I'm joined today with Dwayne Maxey, elder extraordinaire, ex-homicide detective, generally amazing man of words and wisdom. And today we're going to talk about faith in light of trauma, in light of the unknown, having hope in the light of the unknown, all of the above, or ultimately whatever you want to talk about. So would you like to say something about yourself?
I will say it to you. My wife calls me Lord Husband, but you can call me Max.
Yeah. So Max is good. I don't think I can call you Lord Husband.
Probably not appropriate, but
I have heard her say that. So which would you like to start on? Do you want to focus on hope in light of the unknown, because we all face unknown every day, or do you want to kind of touch more on faith and trauma and dealing with things from the past?
I think it's up to you. Just wherever it takes us. Go ahead.
You're the pro. So, okay, well, let's talk about faith and trauma. Okay. When did you, tell me about your faith story. When did you first come to faith?
A very long time ago. I couldn't tell you the date.
That's fine.
I can tell you where, and I could tell you who the preacher was, but that was a long time ago. A very long time ago.
Were you now you were a Marine?
6 years.
So did you come to faith before the Marines, after the Marines, in
yes,
the midst
before.
Before the Marines?
Okay.
Okay, so you were a young man then when you came to faith.
I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17, so yes.
Okay. All right. And so you have maintained your faith in God throughout all of that, having been stationed as a Marine. What years were you there? You were stationed at Camp Lejeune.
I was.
And what years were you there?
At Lejeune?
Yeah.
Well, I was in the Marine Corps from 76 to 82, but I was there from 77 to the end of 79.
Okay, so you joined post-Vietnam War.
Vietnam ended in 1975, and I joined in 76.
Okay. So in the midst of all of your time in the Marine Corps then, were you exposed to a lot of, and you don't have to go into details or anything, but were you exposed to some trauma and the kind of things that people tend to see in the midst of military experiences?
Yeah, coming off of Vietnam, all of the staff NCOs and NCOs were primarily, I should say, victims of a bad war, and many were addicted to alcohol and drugs. But that's who our leaders were at that time.
Yeah. So how did you hold on to your faith then through all of that? What was your experience with God?
I was one of those fortunate people who had a mother who was grew up as a Christian, grew up in a home. Her sisters, her brother, they were all very much church-going people. In fact, my mother's twin brother was a pastor. So.
Okay. So all of that experience then, did you have depth of knowledge then with some of that? Because they raised you were raised around Christianity?
Yes. We used to go to vacation Bible schools. They had a number of competitions who could name all the books of the Bible, you know, all the things that are appropriate for young people growing up.
Sure, all the same kind of stuff that we try to do here. Coming up on VBS pretty soon too. Hopefully we'll have a lot of kids learn there too. Okay, so then if throughout your years in the Marine Corps, after the Marine Corps, you clearly saw a side of humanity while you were there that's not the prettiest side of humanity. Would you agree with that?
That's true. They teach you to be killers. Not that all killing is bad. It's not. Most people don't understand violence or how to come to grips with it, but you certainly learn to kill.
I'm sure. Yeah, I've never had to do that. I mean, I killed a mouse with a dumbbell one time, and that was enough.
Somehow I'm not surprised by that.
across the room. My mom wasn't happy with the mess.
But not.
Kersplat, yeah. After the Marine Corps, did you immediately go into law enforcement?
Nope. I got out of the Marine Corps after 6 years. That was 1982. I went to school. No desire to be in law enforcement. It was the summer of 1986, and it occurred to me that the place where I was working, a warehouse, while going to school, that the warehouse was likely to close. So I opened up the paper one day, looked at the want ads. I don't even know if they still have want ads, but I looked.
They barely have newspapers anymore, so.
So I looked through there and I found 3 places, and I went and applied for the positions. One of those was for the city of Urbana as a police officer. I went and took the test with about 300 other people, mostly men. When it was said and done, I ended up number 6th on the list. So October 31st, I was correct in that the warehouse was going to close, and it did close on October 31st. On November the 9th, they asked me to come in for an interview. So I went in for an interview, and I stopped off at after leaving the interview. My mother had worked across the street, so I stopped over and talked to her. And it was in that time period where, had I been home, I would have received the phone call that said, "Hey, do you want a job?" So I got home and I called them back, and they offered me a job. So for 9 days, I was without employment. God has a way of taking care of us. I think going into the Marine Corps was essential for me because it helped me to grow up. Getting out, the education was good, as it is with most people, but throughout my entire life, God has always been present in affording me certain of the particular significant aspects of my life, like getting a job, like who I married and when I married him. He's been there for all of it. It's and I acknowledge that, and I'm grateful for it.
How has that then, because he has given you those clear experiences that you know that God is with you, when you have been in the face of trauma, difficulty, frankly, human horrors, how have those experiences helped ground you in your faith? And addendum question, when you have seen life's difficulties, what kind of questions did you have? Doubts did you have? Worries, fears, concerns about God, about life?
I think we have to go back a little bit and explain my history.
Okay.
So for 28 years, I was in law enforcement. Again, I got hired by the city of Urbana. I spent time after the end of my first year, going into my second year. They recognized there was a need for a SWAT team, so they were putting a SWAT team together. And a few of the guys says, "You haven't been here long enough. Don't do it. They won't pick your name anyway." Yet they did. So I was on their first SWAT team. Got to see a number of things that were brutal, but my whole career there were things that were brutal. When you see evil and when you recognize evil for what it is, then you have to believe that there's something that opposes evil. And for me, I already had that background, so trying to understand how evil people work and how they prey on the innocent, the naive, the gullible. And then being able to put what skills I had, what wisdom I have received from God, I learned a lot. I mean, every time there was a class that would teach me, a secular class that would teach me about how the human mind works and the depravity of it, I took it because I enjoyed putting bad people away. It's hard to make someone understand or teach someone that there's evil out there, and just how bad it is, because most people, they don't want to know.
You know, I listen to a lot of videos, or watch a lot of videos, and listen to a lot of teaching on beliefs about God, how to understand God's existence, and one of the issues that seems to often be brought up is morality, and how, you know, we talk about evil, and there's the existence of evil, and we, from a Christian perspective, the only reason we can even say evil exists is because we believe in a moral lawgiver, that there is ultimate justice, that God is ultimately just and righteous, and there is a standard of good, and the opposition of that standard is therefore evil. And from an atheistic perspective, or for anybody that doesn't believe in God, it's all relative. There really is no such thing as good and evil. They might say this is good, this is bad, but for them it's just their opinion. And so who are they to say somebody else is evil at all, or good, whatever? So when you have seen that kind of depth of evil, you have I would imagine, a greater perspective of what evil actually looks like in this world, compared to somebody who might just think that, I spilled my plate of spaghetti all over the carpet, and I feel like a great evil has been done. Do you know what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying. There are some people who say, okay, we know there are bad people in the world. We know there are good people. So if we have a God, we have to have a devil, and that they are opposites of equal in nature. One is as equally good as the other is equally bad. And those people, they seem to fail to understand that God created Lucifer, and he wasn't evil when he created him. He chose to be. And Satan, Lucifer, he's no match for God by any means.
Right.
But they don't understand that because they don't read the Bible enough.
Right. Which is why I don't know that I would say they were equal in nature. I think Satan wants to be equal.
Oh, I don't think they are equal.
But they can't.
Some
be.
people.
Yeah. Some people think
it.
that. Yeah.
And that's a shame, because it's a fundamental truth that they should understand, and I don't know why they don't, other than ignorance.
Right. Yeah, I get asked often, I don't know if my answer is sufficient or not, but I get asked often about why would God even bother putting the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden if he just wanted us to be with him all the time? Why would he even bother doing that? And, you know, one thing that we get from the book of Romans, when Paul writes about how, you know, the Jews, they had the law, and it was by the law that their sin was revealed. So because they had the law, God clearly said, this is good. Therefore, anything that they do that's in opposition to that is not good. It reveals sin. Really, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was the first law. It's the first time God said, do this, don't do this. If you disobey this, then this is what's going to happen. This is the result of it. And in doing so, because he gave them that option, then it also allowed the opportunity. It gave them free will, and it also allowed the opportunity for his goodness to shine through, because they could no longer be ignorant of good, or take it for granted or neglect it. Does that make sense?
Very much so. God has always wanted a people of his own. He has longed for us, and by that I mean a people human, not one particular religion or another, just Christianity, whether it's Catholic or Baptist. But he has always wanted a people of his own. He placed us in the Garden of Eden, and we had the right to choose from good and bad. When the first sin was committed, when Eve and Adam ate the apple, they understood right from wrong at that point. The second tree was the tree of life, and God had to take that away from us, because he doesn't want us to be evil and live forever. That's
right.
That would be horrible for humanity.
It was his mercy that he banished them from the garden.
Absolutely.
And prevented them from eating the tree of life, which would have saddled humanity with separation from him for
Forever.
Eternity ongoing.
Yes, and that would be hell.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he is a just God, and he knew what was going to happen. So that's when Christ came into play, albeit down the line. But he knew he had to rectify the rights and the wrongs of the world, and that propitiation by Christ is what allowed him to do that.
I have often looked at it as, he put the tree there, and he knew what they were going to do. I mean, he knew what they were going to do. And in it, he also knew what Lucifer would do. He knew what the serpent would try to do, to try to rob God of the glory that's due him. That's everything Satan tries to do. It all boils down to trying to rob God of the glory that's due to God. That's why he tells Adam and Eve, if you eat from this, you'll be like God. Well, if they can be like God, that means God doesn't get all the glory. We get the glory.
He's a great deceiver, right?
Right. He's a great deceiver. And so he knew that this was going to happen. And we could look at this and say, well, then if he knew he was going to do it, why couldn't he and then it happened, why not just wipe everything out? Why have this existence and this world and this universe full of corruption? Why not wipe everything out? Now, I have an answer for that.
What is it?
I'm curious what you think.
It seems to me that, again, God wanted a people of his own. He knew that for us to be that which he desired, we had to have free will, that we had to understand right from wrong, and that we had to be given the choice to choose right and to turn our back towards that which was wrong. He knew that we were an inferior, wretched little species that was incapable of living a holy life. So he was patient with us. He gave us the Mosaic Law, and we didn't fare well with trying to follow the books of the Old Testament. He knew we wouldn't be able to. And he had some interactions with people as far as the sacrifices, but ultimately it came down to there was only going to be one correction, one propitiation, and that was the death of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Through Jesus.
And that was the only thing that would right the wrong.
I agree. It's the only thing that would right the wrong.
Right.
So it would be easy for us to sit in judgment of God and say, God, you should have just wiped everything else out and started over.
Yeah.
Why not just start over?
And where were we when he brought the universe into creation?
Right. We were nothing.
Yeah.
We were nothing.
Do we really want to go
But
there?
we do that. But we do that all the time.
Okay, but we should
Humanity does it all the time, sitting there in accusation of God.
But we should
like
not.
we know better. No, we shouldn't. I look at that and I think, okay, if God had wiped everything out, instead of banishing from the garden, if he had just wiped everything out and said, okay, time to start over, that would have communicated to the serpent, to Satan, that there's nothing that God could create that Satan can't permanently corrupt. And if Satan can permanently corrupt and ultimately corrupt anything God creates, wouldn't that make Satan more powerful than God? Wouldn't corruption be more powerful than creation?
I don't think that Satan could ever be more powerful than God.
I don't think that either. This is a what if.
Right.
If Satan could fully corrupt God's creation to the point that the only way anything good can come from it is for it to be completely wiped out, wouldn't that mean that Satan's corruptive power is more powerful than creation?
It might mean that to Satan, but in actuality, Satan is a created being of God.
I agree.
And so there's no way that would hold any truth.
Well, as a what if, this is a what
his
if
perspective, right?
This is right. So if we know that to be true, though, that for God to completely wipe everything out, that what that communicates to Satan is that Satan can touch whatever God wants to create and corrupt it, then God's not going to fully just wipe everything out all the way. So then, lo and behold, you end up with Noah. You have the world is full of wickedness. Sin has fully corrupted everything. He sees Noah. Noah's the only righteous one. Noah's following him. He says, I'm going to bring down this flood. I'm going to destroy all the wickedness. I'm going to destroy what I created makes me sick. I'm so angry with it. I'm going to destroy all of it. So he gets Noah. He tells him, I want you to build a boat. The rains are going to come down. I want you to save these animals. I'm going to send them to you. And then sure enough, Noah does so. And God sends the rain. And the ark is lifted up. And that water wipes out all the wickedness, but it also redeems Noah in his faith. It reveals to him that, hey, I was actually listening. I was actually following it.
No, it wasn't perfect.
It's a redemption. No, it wasn't perfect. So all the wickedness wasn't wiped out.
Right.
All the wickedness wasn't wiped out, but the rest of it was. But in the midst of it, Noah in his faith was redeemed. This kind of gets referenced in 1 Peter chapter 3 as an example of baptism, what baptism does. That it wipes out our wickedness, and also the waters lift us up and redeem our faith, which is pretty cool. So in this, you have God could have destroyed everything, but he didn't destroy everything. He allowed wickedness to continue on, because if he wiped everything out, again, that would have been communicating to Satan. There's nothing that Satan can't corrupt with what God created.
We were created in the image of God, which means that we have free will.
And also, you're onto something. And also, else does it mean about his capability with us?
I'm not sure where you're going.
Okay. It also means we have something in us that is redeemable.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yes.
We have free will. We have to understand that there is an evil in the world, and we have to be able to recognize that evil as being inherently bad. And then we know that in us is the desire to seek something greater than ourselves, to seek our Creator. And when we seek that Creator, we do so because we recognize there is a good, and the good is a much better path than is the evil.
Mm-hmm.
So we tend to embrace that, and as we continue down that path, ultimately we choose God, and then we build on our faith by continuing to read the Bible and listen to reverends like yourself, and going to Sunday school and all vacation Bible school and all the good stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I think that a lot of it all boils down to Christ, just like you've said several times now about the propitiation of our sin. I think it's through Jesus that he truly dealt the death knell on evil, on Satan. Sure. That because in that moment, it was Satan has been trying to corrupt everything God created, trying to turn it away from God, trying to rob God of his glory. All the corruption, all the sin, that's what it turns on.
Yeah, so he bit his heel.
He bit his heel.
Yeah.
But in the moment of Jesus dying on the cross, taking all the sins, and then rising again from the grave, conquering death and showing that God is more powerful than death and the consequences of sin. Like in all of that, what God then communicated and showed was that there's nothing that Satan can corrupt that God can't redeem. And that is infinitely more powerful.
I would agree. Sometimes I hear people say that the Romans killed Christ. The Jews killed Christ. Nobody killed Christ. Christ gave up his own life. And it was very calculated. It was very meaningful. He died in 6 hours or thereabouts. Mm-hmm. That was quicker than most crucifixions. And Christ knew that the only one that could give up his life was himself. And he did so freely and willingly. Mm-hmm. It's a remarkable story.
I had a friend of mine. This is his opinion on this, but he has this thought that, Scripture talks about how when Jesus died, the skies turned dark, everything turned black, and he looks at that and says, well, of course it did, because in that moment Jesus took on all unrighteousness across all space and time. Like he took all unrighteous, not just the unrighteous, the people that were living then and there, but all the unrighteous of people before Jesus and all of our unrighteousness and all those that will come after us. He took it on. So all the evil gathered in that moment.
I would agree.
Onto Jesus.
When I think about that, I think about being on this planet. I don't know what else is out there. I assume that there's other life out there. I want to believe that it is, but I don't know that God has the same relationship that he has with us. I don't know if we are uniquely special. I don't know what his plan is. I can speculate, I can hope, I can wait and finally find out when I get to heaven, but it's a fascinating story. It's love, it's sacrifice. I mean, we are his creation.
Mm-hmm.
Christ was there when we were created. He knit us in the womb. He wanted us to succeed. And so he died for us, and then he gave the Holy Spirit to guide us as we go on throughout our way.
And so to bring it full circle then, in the midst of all that, you have been guided in the midst of seeing the corruption and the suffering and the pain and the evil and everything else. And while I've asked you not to go into those stories, you have shared some of those stories with me in the past, and some of them are heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching too, if I'm honest. And I don't, how you maintain sanity in the face of some of those. I think the only way you can do it is with the Lord.
So I would say that if you see enough death, and I can't even count the number of death investigations or such that I've worked countless autopsies. But for me, I was very good at understanding the human mind and understanding how evil affects people. So I'm not bragging, but to be honest, I thought just a little bit quicker than some of my counterparts and quicker than some of the people who I was interviewing. So I had a little more success, which means you do more interviews, which mean you get into the mindsets of some of the most horrific people on the planet, just people who are truly pure evil and no redeeming qualities. And when you do that, and when you also at the same time understand the victim and the victim's mindset going into the murder or the sexual assault or whatever it is, after a while, it just takes this little shred onto your soul. And I don't know of a better way to explain that other than it is something that it affects you. It affects you, and I guess if you see a 10-year-old girl, you think, a child, a beautiful little child, you do what I do long enough, or what I did long enough, and you see a 10-year-old girl as a victim of some horrific sex crime or a victim of murder. And you know the age, the hair color, the eye color of the child, the time of day that it's abducted. And so you know what evil prevails in this world of ours. And it weighs heavily on you. Yeah. So, like I said, it's a little shred on your soul, something that can only be rectified by Christ.
Kind of picks at you and stuff.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it leaves a mark, a stain.
Yeah. So then how have you been able to walk that out, giving that kind of stuff to Christ?
Because it's the only way to do it. Because there's no way I can overcome the evil of the world. I don't know anyone who by himself can. I know from my upbringing that the only way to overcome the damage caused by the evil in this world is to turn to Christ. So that's what I do.
You know, you were working in the justice system, and I was reading a book recently. I don't remember which were the books. I don't remember which one of the books I was reading. I'm reading about several of them at the same time right now. But it talked about how we like to say that we can't legislate morality. You've heard that before.
Sure.
That's a common phrase. You can't legislate morality. But this author said, but that's actually the only thing you can actually legislate, because our justice, our laws, have to be based on, concepts, a grounding of right and wrong.
Yeah, our laws are fashioned after the Magna Carta and also the Ten Commandments. I mean, they're Judeo-Christian beliefs of God.
Right. In our nation, that's what they are. But across all nations, they haven't always been that. No. But there has to be a concept, a standard of right and wrong, for them to be based off of. And so in order for us to have, it's as I think about God and the nature of evil, you've got the justice system. And now we culturally have this idea of social justice. And so those almost seem like two opposing forms or concepts of justice. Do we get justice from society? Does society determine good and evil? What is good and evil? Or is there something supernatural beyond us, a moral lawgiver that determines what is good and evil? And which one do we follow? Which one do we pursue? And which one would actually give us an answer for the evil and the suffering that we
I think the answer is, how foolish are you? I mean, we have written into our DNA, and that's kind of a metaphor, but written in our DNA to pursue our Creator, to know our God. He's written a great book for us that gives us a pretty good guideline for how we're supposed to behave. So when I think about the Bible and how it would have us behave in the world that is a fallen world, am I going to follow that path, or am I going to follow the path of some politician or some do-gooder who doesn't have very much wisdom at all? I mean, It's not not much of a choice there, is it?
Well, I mean, Scripture talks about how God's law is written on our hearts. Again,
It is.
in Romans, when he's talking about how law revealed sin, he's also saying that the Gentiles were following it without ever being told it, because God has written morality on our hearts. We know we've all eaten from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
So why would I let someone who's trying to make a name for themselves supersede the Bible?
Well, even beyond an individual person, why necessarily, if we know that, why let society be the place to dictate what's good and evil? Again, this falls down to if we believe in God or not, doesn't it? Because if we don't believe in God, then is there really any concept of justice? If you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in a moral lawgiver, and what your idea of good, and evil might be your idea, but if somebody else disagrees with you, well, then that's their right to disagree with you because they believe that, in which case, what's the whole point of the justice system in the first place? There is no point. There is no point.
Yeah. I try to tell the people that, or my children who have grandchildren, and a few of the people who are closer to me, this world of ours is kind of upside down. It's groaning. And so they need to, and I'm very careful about telling people what their needs are, because I don't have the right but to say that they need to get their children in church, because society is going to instruct them in what they need to think, how they should feel, and that's not going to turn out well. The only place to truly, if you love your child, to truly help them is to get them into a good church and not take them up and drop them off at the door and pick them up when it's over, but to engage with them.
Engage is right, to engage in faith.
That's critical.
That it's not just something, we don't just put our faith and pursuit of God in a box that we open up every now and then, but that we worship God with our lives, and we teach our kids why we believe in God, why it matters that Jesus Christ died on the cross, and how that's actually the only thing that does matter, and is the most important pursuit. That if we don't do that, we're setting them up for failure, because the world is a lot louder. There is a lot more evil shouting in our ears and just showing right into our faces. It makes it very difficult sometimes to see the good. And I don't think we can let society tell us good and evil, because once that breaks down, there is no need for any kind of other justice system. There is no. What would be the crimes for you to investigate?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the people that committed the murders or horrendous acts that you saw, then for them that was good. So who are you then to investigate them and tell them they were evil?
Yeah. Just look at Islam, right?
Mm-hmm.
So much of what we hold true and dear, they do not. It's a warrior's religion, and so killing infidels is good for them.
Mm-hmm. It's encouraged.
So, yeah, I just assume we not have some fake God, no matter how young or old he might be in the history of the world. I think I'm going to stick with the Creator, the one who I know to exist and be true.
That's right. I am thankful that in the midst of suffering, that suffering points us back to the Creator, that evil in the world reminds us that for us to even understand that this is evil means there must also be good. There must also be absolute good in God. And I'm with you. I'd much rather follow and pursue the heart of a God who loves me, who entered into our suffering, because that's what Jesus did.
Sure he did.
He didn't just ignore the suffering. He didn't just take away the suffering. He entered into our suffering and then took it to the cross so that we can have eternal life instead of suffering the justice price, which is death.
I agree.
Sometimes it's hard to remember that in the face of everything else.
Yeah, but we have a lot of a lot of things to remind us. I, I try to start every day with a quiet time in the chamber, and I take my Bible in there and I read.
You say chamber. If anybody watches this or listens to it, they're not gonna have a clue. They're like, "What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Chamber? What? What kind of chamber are you talking about?" Just so that they
A
know.
hyperbaric chamber.
Hyperbaric chamber.
I find
All
it,
right.
I find it to be healthy for me.
Yeah,
So
they're gonna hear this and think that you like go to some sneaky dungeon in the basement of your house,
I hope not.
or that maybe you live in a mansion or something. And you have
No.
some. Yeah. Okay.
It's
I mean, that'd be
just
okay.
a hyperbaric chamber that
Yeah.
helps the lungs.
Yeah, it does.
So I sit in there and I read my Bible.
Absolutely.
And then I'll get so engrossed in it that my wife will come and tap on the door and say, "Time to go to work."
Uh-huh.
So I get up and I go to work.
Get up, go. So were you in there today?
This morning, yeah.
What were you reading today?
Today I didn't. I only had 25 minutes to go in there.
Okay.
So this was the rare example where I didn't. But I did go in there and I used my private time to pray.
Right.
I think I've gone through Hosea, Jonah. I'm not sure.
Yeah, you were telling me over the weekend
Yeah.
that you just read Jonah.
I take a couple of those and read them, and I constantly look things up on the phone. I take it with me.
Yeah,
So if I don't understand the verbiage, I can pick up on it
Yeah.
fairly quickly.
that works.
Yep.
Max, I appreciate you coming in and sitting down, having this conversation with me.
You know, I owe you.
You don't owe me anything.
You
What are you
have
talking
been,
about?
You have been the kind of leader that this church has been hoping and praying for. You're delightful to work with. Your family is not a burden by any stretch of the imagination. They are a gift to all of those around us. So, I mean, no, that's not fair. The vast majority of this church is very grateful
Well,
for you and your family being here.
I appreciate that. If all of that's true,
I wouldn't
it's
say it
only
if it
because
wasn't.
I know that. If then it's only by the grace of God,
I agree.
because I'm all too aware of my own faults
I know
and
that.
miscomings, shortcomings. So yeah, I think a lot of it is just you guys are easy to love. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming and doing this.
You're welcome.
You don't owe me anything. Would you like to do it again sometime?
I suppose.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll come up with another topic.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right.